Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to another edition of Infection Podcast. My name is Nick Craig. You can follow me on X at Nicholas M. Craig, or, of course, check out our website, which happens to be infectionpodcast.com. Joining me, as always, Brian with an I Aldridge. What's going on, buddy?
Not too much. Good to see everybody. Hopefully, you can find me on the internet at Brian Aldridge on all the other platforms but X, and at Boise Computer on X. So
yes, still
hopefully
able to get
someday
there.
that cheer dad just gets off of X and gets pissed off or something about what Elon says.
I'll tell you what, the best decision I ever made a couple of years ago was buying nickcraig.com. It was like $600, which seems absurd. I'm glad I purchased it. I knew what my future held. And so I'm glad I made the purchase. Fortunately, you can't really do that with well, I guess I don't know. Maybe you could do that with Twitter accounts. I don't really know how that would work. But
you have to go offer the person some money to give it up.
Yeah, but then what happens when they don't give it to you?
I know.
That's a real. Yeah, like it's like not like a domain transfer. Like you go through like a third party service and it gets transferred, and like there's a middleman. You just have to hope that the person gives you the Twitter password. If not,
then you're pretty much out.
Yeah. So maybe you do like a deposit.
That's where you definitely need a broker, because there's that in between stage that everybody gets really nervous.
Yeah, exactly.
We used to do that especially with web hosting and all those things. Sometimes there's a handoff, and it's like there's a point where if I was a sleazeball, I could just take your domain and take it to court or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very real thing. And there's that moment of anxiety with people wherein it's like, okay, well, I have total control to direct this. Either I have to trust me and let it happen, or go to somebody else.
Yeah.
But anyways, this is way off topic from.
It is. But Brian, we have been, I say dreading, and then maybe that's not the right word to use. We have, I should say you have been piling up the economic news for at least the last 3 months, if not longer. And we were off last week, and our schedule is going to fluctuate over the next couple weeks. Got Labor Day coming up, and some holidays and some stuff like that. I feel like we need to jump into the overall video game economy and just kind of bang this stuff out. What are your thoughts on that?
That works for me. Well, let's start this out quick.
Sure.
So this is one that came out from GameIndustry.biz, and they're saying that the U.S. game spending had a 5% decrease in June. So, game spending is still on the way down. Some of the bigger titles, I'm sure, have been pushed off a little bit. There are a few that are doing pretty well. Let's see, what was it? Genshin Impact?
Sure, Genshin Impact, yeah.
There's some
this is spending,
that came out.
This is consumer spending, right?
Yes. Yeah. People in the U.S. spending money on games.
Not the studio spending on their
not the studio. Not the studio. Yeah. And so like Elden Ring was one that was one of the top ones here because of its DLC that they put out. But game spending is down. People, if you take a look at the economy, it's something that I think people have been putting up with. But I assume a lot of people are, from what I read, a lot of people are living off credit cards. They're at credit card debts at all-time highs. That's something that started with COVID, it seems like. And people are, I think, probably hitting a point to where they're getting maxed out. Like you're rather than coming up with money that you're going to have to owe back in the future, some people are cutting back. And this is it. And plus, you've got people in the government trying to all of a sudden, improve things before election year. So some things are slightly improving, but overall, this is how it is. I think it's going to continue to go down.
How insane is it that Minecraft, which I assumed everybody already owned at least 3 copies of, how the hell is that still ranking number 6? This must be all the realms and all the extra
because they've got all the
that they've got.
Yeah, you can, with the coins, you can go buy all the different skins, and you can have access to realms, which is pretty much like a hosting service that they offer for kids to be able to run multiplayer. Hogwarts Legacy is still way up there. I feel like that was over a year ago, wasn't it? Now.
Oh yes, absolutely.
So, but one thing I'm taking from this is there's not a lot of big new titles. These are all titles that are a little bit older, right?
Yeah. Well, two new titles.
Two of them are new titles. So these are all older things. Mario Kart 8 is still on here, for goodness sakes.
What is this? Is a it's a role playing game. Oh, it's a Switch game. Okay.
Okay, Nintendo Switch.
So it's a fighting game? No, it's an RPG. Okay, never heard of it. I don't even know how to pronounce it. Shin
Megami
Tensei 5.
Tensei 5, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Vengeance.
Great. Yeah. So obviously this is not shocking.
Yeah.
We know that the current status of the economy, contrary of what you may or may not hear coming out of Chicago this week. The economy is not in a phenomenal shape right now.
Yeah.
Not only are you seeing cuts on the studio side, but you're seeing the consumer spending less money. And this 5% drop year over year is, it's still $4.6 billion in the month of June. So it's not like the industry has completely tanked. But when you take $4.6 billion and you look at 5% of that, you're talking about millions of dollars, over $2 million worth of decrease in that amount of time. That is not an insignificant amount of money. One of the things that's noted in here, Roblox surprisingly saw a revenue increase of 15% month over month, May to June. Pokemon Go, which I didn't realize anybody was still playing,
a
22% increase. And an increase in downloads. I guess they had a big anniversary event, 8 years, which is insane to think as well. Hardware spending fell. Mobile spending still grew year over year, but it was a 26% decline in content spending on the console platform that really led to this sharp decrease. It fell 6% in May, and it was 3% in April. So, I mean, when you look at the 6, 5, and 3 over the last 3 or 4 months, I think you can chalk that up to, you average it at 5 or whatever, 4.5, or it's essentially been the same. It's been on a steady decline of 3 to 5% over the last couple of months, and I don't anticipate. Now, the new Call of Duty will come out in November, I believe. That will likely cause the skyrocket.
But it might be swayed a lot by the Game Pass as far as how they're going to show those numbers.
That's
people
true.
Playing versus income. For Microsoft, that's going to be a draw to something that then they'll make money on outside of it, right?
Sure.
But they're not going to show that in the numbers right away. So I think that's going to play with that particular title a little bit.
The big college football game, College Football 25, came out in July. So that came out last month. That game went bananas. So I assume maybe you'll see a little bit of you'll see 2% in July or something like that when we get those numbers to come out. So it seems like you'll have these individual titles that might make it, instead of it being a 6%, a 2%, or a 1%, or a 3%, whatever the final number ends up being. Moral of the story, consumers have less to spend. They're cutting out discretionary purchases. Video games, unless you're doing it literally for a living, is for 99.9% of individuals a discretionary purchase. And you're cutting those out.
And that's the thing is here, people are going to save their money for the titles that they've been waiting for, whether that's Call of Duty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Football Manager. There hasn't been a college football game in 10 years. I mean, people have been literally chomping at the bit for that.
So I think that as these, really what we're affected by, look at all the studios that have shut down in the past 6 months, that have laid off tons of people. I think we're going to continue to see this consistent lowering, because look at all the titles that aren't going onto the market that should be rolling out over the next however many months.
Sure.
That are not rolling out, or they're waiting till the optimal time now because they're not releasing all these other titles throughout the year. So I feel like we're going to continue to see this exact same trend, just because it's going to be fallout from the huge fluctuations that we've seen in the video game industry. The titles that would have bumped up the numbers either are being put off and are on hold. Some that would have mystery titles that came out have been canceled. It's just I think that this isn't just one thing. I think it's a lot of those things stacking up together to make it just decrease. I don't think there's one thing they could change to fix it. I think
not.
It's all the things coming together that are just causing this. But it's a good thing and a bad thing. The bad thing is there's not one thing you can do to fix it.
Exactly.
Right? It's spread out, but you can't just fix it easily. So
sure. I guess I'm going to foreshadow a little bit. We've got this website that keeps track of the industry layoffs.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just show this first, then we'll go into what's going on. Yeah. In 2024, this was updated 2 days ago, they are estimating in total over 11,540 layoffs in the video game industry in this calendar year.
Which is kind of a niche industry. I mean, there are a lot compared to some.
Look at them.
How many there used to be, but there's not really that many video game industries compared to other industries. So
I would
this
think
many
that,
people being
look
affected is a huge percentage. But this is a huge percentage of the market.
You're right, and you see the big numbers coming from the Riot Games, 530 back in January. Who was somebody else was up? Take-Two, EA 670, PlayStation 900. So I mean, you're seeing these big numbers. Sega, Creative Assembly / Sega, whatever the hell that is, 240 people. So I mean, you've got that, but then you've got all these small, like Modern Wolf. I don't even know what they are. Six people, and so you've got all of these numbers that add up to this astonishing number of 11,500 individuals. This is coming off of 10,000 in 2023 and about 8,500 in 2022. Now, how many of these individuals were laid off in 2022, found a new studio in 2024, and were laid off again? It's so you can't really add all of those numbers together. It's not. I don't think that would be an accurate. I don't think that would be an accurate number to use. But it's astonishingly high, and it's affecting not only the small studios who are always going to be strapped for cash, but it's the big guys as well. Ubisoft San Francisco, Brian, laid off 45 people back on the 15th, which was on last Thursday. So that's a studio right there that is a San Francisco / NC. I don't know if didn't know they had a North Carolina. And Ubisoft in North Carolina as well. So 45 employees from those two facilities, scrapped and gone.
And there's one thing I mentioned a while ago, but there's an article here I brought back up because I was referenced in a long time ago. But here's some people that were talking at GDC about studios are at the mercy of this house of cards that is the funding system we've built.
Yes.
And the one thing I want to highlight about that, when they say the funding system that they have built, the problem is the funding system now has been COVID dollars, minority, helping minority or people of, whatever it can be, getting funding for them from government things. Well, those things are all temporary. And when the government's doing so poorly and they start cutting funds, then they quit funding things like this and the fake money goes away. And now all of a sudden studios are having to make games that make money by people purchasing them or, purchasing things in them. And and I think that the problem is when they say the house of cards that they've built, that's crumbling here, that house of cards is the fact that they have relied on pretty much socialism in the government to fund their operations, based on whatever criteria they can meet. And that's not how the market should be working. It should be based on, if you make a really good game and you put shit out to market, you should make some money. Not if you hire certain people. Not guaranteed, but not if you hire certain people and you have certain people on your staff, then we'll give you money and then you can at least make it through another year. And that's how it worked. And that money's, from what I understand, is dried up, and that's why I thought it was really interesting. They said that, the system that they built, because the people that are complaining now are the ones who built the system that's failing.
Well, that's one part of it, which I agree with. Yeah. The other part of it is I don't think they're called angel investors anymore. I think there's a new term for them, but they used to be back in the 2010s. They were called angel investors, and they were the ones that were going to every company that had the word blockchain in it and, giving them oodles of money.
Throwing the money.
Those guys are starting to tighten their own belts because, there's no such thing as unlimited money. Even you look at a guy like Warren Buffett. I mean, he's got more money than God. It's still not unlimited. And these guys are looking for the best ROI, return on investment, they can get. And for a long time, it was fitting these diversity, equity, and inclusion bubbles. That's what everybody's in the ballpark of EDI this, DEI that, depending on what way you slice up the acronym. And I have a suspicion, I don't have necessarily any hard evidence to back it up, but I would guess and gamble, Brian, that these investors have shut that tap off and said, okay, things are tight, and now we're going to invest in projects that we think are going to give us significant ROI. We're no longer just writing blank checks to fill diversity quotas. And that is, I think, when you go to this article, the students at the mercy of the house of cards, that the funding system that we built, I think there's a lot of truth to that. That's been built a long time over the last, maybe 6 or 7 years. You've really seen that big push in all of corporate America. And especially as these groups go to these, various studios, go to big time funders to try and get money. The first thing on their slide deck is the racial or gender or ethnicity breakdown of their employees. And while that used to woo investors, my sneaking suspicion would be they're no longer interested in that. They're looking for how quickly they can not only get the base dollars that they invested back, but the profit that they would assume from making that initial investment. And just as regular consumers are tightening their belt at the grocery store, or at Costco or Sam's Club or wherever else, these guys are doing it too. The money is not unlimited. And instead, so they're still spending it. They're just spending it. The money is not unlimited. I think they're just spending it in different places. And thank you to Donnie Plays PC for subscribing 26 months in a row. The money's still there. It's maybe a little bit harder to get. And people are looking for successful projects that will give them significant ROI. At the end of the day, here's the thing, Brian. This was only a flash pan. Because at the end of the day, contrary to what any of these jackasses want to say, think, feel, hug themselves, and proclaim, investors, the vast majority of investors are interested in one thing and one thing only. They don't care about the product. They don't care about who's making it, how many people are making it, or anything else. They care about one thing, Brian, getting their freaking money back. That's it. Plain and simple. Then I don't care what kind of spiel they give you. That's what they're invested in. They're not charity. They're interested in making their money back. Plain and simple.
Well, and here's an interesting one from Game Industry where and this is halfway an opinion piece, but it's from one of their people. It says the state of game publishing, the era of the generalist indie publisher is over.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
And this is the thing is you're going to be focused on something, the money is not unlimited. I think we're going back to how things more used to be. I think we had a weird stage with really bad economies. I remember in 2008, around that time, we had a bunch of indie stuff going on. But
it's when Minecraft got its start. Wasn't that like 2007, 2008?
Yeah. And, usually what happens in a time like this, when all the major studios start to cut back, that's when the indies start to shine. And that's what happened back then. But the problem is right now, things have got to be worse because they're not coming to shine this time.
But maybe what's so interesting?
Of the difference in technology, though. That's what I'm wondering is if we can't produce a product that competes because the things are so crazy now how they're made.
But I'm going to make a counterpoint to you because in 2008, 2010 even, crowdfunding and this sort of release of very early alpha product. Now, yes, Minecraft did it, but that was a different. You literally bought the game outright. There was no nonsense with this. Oh, we have all these goals on.
You're going to get this skin.
You pay $20.
This road after you.
I think my first copy of Minecraft, which I bought with my mom's credit card, was like $20. I was in middle school, and I don't even know if I still have access to it. I'm not even sure how I'd find out. But that is now vastly different. You as an indie studio can now go on Kickstart, or is that called Kickstart? Yeah, Kickstart, Indiegogo, all of these other platforms, and crowdfund your game. That did not, those platforms did not exist in 2008, 2010, even 2012. I mean, very early infancy of these platforms. The problem you have now is the consumers
a little bit.
But the problem you have now is consumers don't trust anybody. And for good reason, because they've been screwed. Well, right, if you loaded up your Kickstarter account,
all of this years,
you'd probably have hundreds of dollars invested in projects that will never come out and are that you paid years ago.
Or were nowhere near what they put on the promise.
So that's the issue too.
I'm still waiting to be playable. It's been 5, 6, 7, 8 years.
Sure. So it's not only there's more availability to get funding, but consumers are much more leery of giving their money out to an unfinished product because they have been screwed time and time and time again. And that's what's so it's never been easier and it's never been harder to try and break through in kind of this indie thing. Now, obviously back in the console days, it was impossible because you'd have to mass produce a product and all of that stuff. So there are huge technical advantages to the 80s, 90s, and even early 2000s. But there's also the plethora of games to play now. And that's what,
much bigger choices.
But, they said the same thing about the movie and television show industry. I mean, yet those still exist, and there's still huge blockbuster hits. You have new franchises like Deadpool, which is out in box office right now. That only popped up a couple of years ago. And then you've got older franchises like Star Wars that are floundering. So I don't necessarily subscribe to the idea that it's impossible to start a new franchise or B, have a successful indie project. There's just so much more circulating now. There's huge pros like crowdfunding.
The end product has to be good. I think it can't be all promises and we're going to do this because that whole crowdfunding, just everything going downhill for so long and never returning the promise. I think that kind of pulled everybody away from it. And I think people want something that they feel like putting their money into it is going to give them back something because of having lost, as you pointed out with me, having lost so much money on things that look like cool ideas that didn't go anywhere. And it seemed like when we first started the podcast, like everyone was putting their money in that. It was like, hey, this is a direct opportunity to fund a game and to get something cool directly, and to pick and choose what I want, made. And that really ended up not being true. You need that structure. You need people being held accountable by a boss and all the things happening, or a team that's really good and is able to keep themselves going and organized. And the ones that come out really successful from indie studios are the ones that are really organized and everybody holds themselves to account. I mean, look at 7 Days to Die.
Sure.
Those guys sat and worked on that, put feature over years, dedicated to it, didn't really change direction other than things that they figured out they needed to change for the longevity of the game. But they all stay dedicated to it. And I think a studio like that will still make it today. But I think we've got so many lazy studios that think that video gaming is going to be easy, or they stepped away from a huge corporation where there's so many things in place to make it run that when they go independent and all of a sudden they're in charge of everything, it's hard. I think you've got kind of a mix.
7 Days to Die had its all-time high player count, Brian, 22 days ago. In the month of July, with 125,000 players. The game, it says release date is July.
That's this latest one.
Yeah,
but they'd have to talk about the original.
I don't remember. I don't remember when 7 Days to Die first.
Maybe the
popped
sales history will show you. 2014.
Yeah, December of 2013. Yeah, 2014. 2014, 2015. This is a game that has been on the market for a decade, and it hit its all-time player pace 22 days ago.
Yep. And that's where I think, there's an example of there's not very many people that are small studios that can pull off that kind of consistent, being able to hold it that long. because there's times probably I'm sure that they were worried about, are we going to continue to make money on this going forward? Are people going to continue to buy this game to where we can continue paying you guys to work on this project? But they did it for 10 years now. Here coming up almost 10 years. They did it, and there was time before that. I mean, they were building it before they were released. So over 10 years now, they've been making that game. They finally just released it. I wish some of the people and that was a Kickstarter originally.
Sure.
If I remember correctly, I think it was Kickstarter that they were on. So that's a perfect example of when it works. But look, how many cases of big titles like that one came from Kickstarter and are actually alive today?
Yeah. And look at it's
pretty small.
Look at this chart. I mean, it shows, while it's not huge growth, at least until recently, it's, I mean, you're talking about steady growth from 2014, consistent growth all the way through 2020. And I guess they did a big release on Thursday, the 25th of July. So they did a huge release then. Maybe there was a big sale on it. I don't know. And there you go. You've got 45,000 people playing it right now. Its 24-hour peak is just over 73,000.
But to get down to this, you have to have a small team of people that really know what they're doing. You can't have quotas. You can't be saying, well, we have to hire these people for this many people for this. That was a small group of people where every person had a purpose, and they did their job. And sure, there were probably people that could have done that job better, but you know what? Because I mean, if you look at the graphics for all of 7 Days to Die's history, they haven't been great. There was a lot of rough graphics in there, like our lovely wall paintings that we would put up in our bases and things. It wasn't always great, but obviously they stuck with the people that they knew they could count on. And some of those people over the 10 years improved quite a bit in their skills and learned new technologies, and they grew with the company. And then the end product was everything they figured out over that 10 years. It's pretty much what you got. I think it's a good way to do it.
Are these the kind of graphics you're talking about?
Yes, those are the kind of graphics
absurd.
I'm talking about.
Absolutely absurd.
I mean,
this is a screenshot from 2017.
For 10 years. I know. Yeah, it's probably not that much different from that.
I'm trying to find the broccoli picture. That's the.
We do need to have a weekend of playing some 7 Days to Die.
Where is this damn broccoli picture? I know I have it somewhere, and I don't know where it is.
Is it the one we put on the wall?
Yes, and it looks like it's obviously supposed to be a tree, but it just looks like a single piece of broccoli just like bent over sideways, and I can't find the damn picture, and it's frustrating me. Where is this?
Well, you look, one thing.
No, because I'm going to spend the entire. I'm not going to listen to a word you're saying for the whole rest of the show until I find this stupid broccoli picture. That's some crazy screenshots.
I'm sure there's quite a mix of screenshots from different games.
There is. It's all H1Z1 miscreated and a couple 7 Days to Die screenshots.
Now, I saw an opinion piece where they were talking about they think the industry takes layoffs too lightly. And I don't know if I agree with that. I think we've had a lot of fluff in the industry of people being hired for positions that aren't necessary for the company to put out a product. I guess that's the nicest way I can say it.
Say that again. The industry.
They think that the industry is taking layoffs too lightly. They're laying off too easily. But, it comes down to dollars. If they are not going to release a product, how are they going to keep all those people hired? Like, that's not how this industry works.
That's what I'm
a software developer,
about.
so I understand how a project works. You go onto a project, you build time, you work, and when the project's done, they don't just keep you on there for good old time's sake. If you're not billing anymore, if you're not doing a project, then you're either gone or you're doing something else.
So is what they're saying is that the studios are pulling the trigger too soon on laying people off, and they should just wait?
Yeah, they're saying that they think that they're jumping to layoffs too quickly,
as opposed to what?
They should keeping the people on.
But for what? Like, if there's nothing to work on,
bankrupt?
If you close a project early, or you end up saying we're scrapping this project, what do you do with all of the people that are working on it?
That's exactly as a programmer. I'm saying, how do you do? I understand how we do our projects, and it's like, it'd be like, you're a car mechanic. You say, well, we're no longer going to be repairing cars at this location.
Yeah, so you fire the mechanic.
So the mechanic would no longer have a job. They're like,
Correct.
well, you can't do that. Well, but they don't work on cars here anymore. They do oil changes, but they're not doing repairs on cars. They don't need a mechanic. But that's unfair. Can't they figure out another place? The mechanic's job is specialized to one thing. He's trained in one thing. He's going to continue to be a mechanic. What are you going to go and have that guy go do oil changes instead? You're hiring the programmers for a specific thing. They do one job. They may branch out and kind of, get more areas of that job that they know how to do, but they still do one job. And if there's not programming work to do, they're not going to switch to filing papers and doing general office work. So this is how this industry works. If the project's gone and they don't have another project to shift you to, you're excess on the payroll, and they can't run like they did Twitter. You can't just keep all these people hired for the sake of keeping hired while you're driving down, going, it doesn't work. And so I think that this is an industry that unions have gotten so invested into lately. And you've got a whole set of young people that don't realize that this is just how software development is. There's other industries that are the exact same way, but this is one where you chase the project, especially in the video game industry, where when there's a big title, you work on that big title, and hopefully you work in a big company where they have another title that when you've published, you can roll off onto. That's why those people continue to have jobs. When they're having to cut 3, 4, 5 different titles that are no longer being made, where are they going to roll those people off to? There's no longer a place to roll those people off to. Well, and then they get laid off. It's not taking it lightly. It's just there's no place to send them, and there's no other job for them to do.
And that's the unfortunate reality of working in an industry where you are project based. But that's not
video games are project based. That's what they don't realize.
But that's not
looking at.
But that's not new.
No, that's what I do. But
there's
I think
been
it's
project-based industries for the last 100 years. Like it's like
but you hire. Think they want
that's like you building a house. You hire a foreman, and he hires a whole bunch of contractors. When the house is built, there's no longer a contract on that house. The foreman cannot continue to pay the plumbing guy to do plumbing on a house that is done. The project is complete. You get paid,
and you move on to and he moves on to another one,
to another project. And maybe if the foreman's good, maybe and you did a good job, he keeps you on. Great. Now there is some level of reciprocity with that, sure. But I think the greatest example of this is probably Rockstar. I mean, they swell up so big for GTA 6, and then they fire everybody because you don't need all of these guys when the game is out.
But they built some of that into the way that they pay their employees.
Sure.
Or at least the way they used to. And I don't know if this has changed. They pay you a higher rate. And a lot of times they'll give you a big bonus at the end of the project once they realize that they're actually going to make money. And so they're not paying you a ton in the upfront part, right? The money comes when you've made that. It's kind of like a salesman's job. When you've made that big sale and the money comes in, then you get your bonus, right? Yeah. And I think that these people coming into it, if you want a consistent job, you go work for a company like Intuit or somebody who's making a consistent software as a service or something that you're ongoing maintaining, and then you're probably going to have a guaranteed job. But you've gone into the equivalence of a sales job. You're making products to sell, right? You're making a product to sell, and if the product's not going to sell, you don't need to make the product anymore, and therefore you don't have a job. As a salesman, if you don't have a product to sell, you're not a salesman for that product anymore, right? You pretty much you're out of a job. And I think that you've got generations of people who've come in and they think that this is unfair when it's just the nature of the beast. It's the way it works in this industry. That they want to change it, but you're going to destroy the whole industry trying to change it to the way that you want it to be, because you can't make games other than doing them either getting all your money up front with a big angel investment, which you talked about them cutting back.
Or, presumably, yeah. I mean,
yeah, you've got to have this consistent money coming in, or big money up front to hire these people. And this is that salesman type of an industry. Either and after it's done, if it sells, it sells. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And you hopefully move on to something else. There you go.
I found
a beautiful picture.
I don't know what the hell that is. That's a house.
That's a house.
Okay, that's the house one. That's a 7 Days to Die picture from.
Yeah, so these are the pictures that you'd put up on your wall. Luckily, they weren't paid DLCs.
It doesn't give me a timestamp. This is sometime in 2017, I guess. Looking good.
Yeah. Yeah, welcome. But wow. Hey, it was fun, and if they come up with games that are fun, people will pay money for them. And yes. I think we've got to so much cookie cutter now. I think also games having such good graphics has kind of hurt it to a bit, because you can get really good gameplay, but if it doesn't have those graphics, then people aren't willing to give it a chance as much anymore, other than ones that somehow get discovered.
Oh, I found it.
I don't know. I just you found our tree.
I found it. This is it. This is what we were talking about.
Yeah.
The broccoli.
It's a perfect picture.
Yeah. But I'm gonna argue your point. 7 Days to Die is the greatest example of this. The graphics have always looked like garbage.
But
Minecraft,
the gameplay was good.
Minecraft, I mean, the early Minecraft, and still obviously with HD texture packs and all this other stuff, it's great now. Everything looks phenomenal. But early on, and even still, if you just play basic Minecraft with the basic texture pack, it doesn't look great. I mean, it's an established look. Everybody knows the look. They sell physical products in stores that look like Minecraft blocks. So it's an acquired taste, for lack of a better term. But those games have always had really good gameplay. H1Z1 is not a bad example either. Now, the gameplay was hot garbage the entire time, and the graphics weren't much better, but it was at least fun to play, and its little quirks made it interesting, and people still chose to play it.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, is nowadays you've got kind of like the two sides of the coin. You've got a game that's a lot of fun, doesn't look great, that people will continue funding it after 10 years. Minecraft, 7 Days to Die. The money will continue to flow for the whole thing. Then you've got the other side of the coin, which is great graphics, really shallow gameplay, which is most games you see come out. Most games that come out.
It's easy to have good graphics now because you're just flipping assets from Unreal or Unity. And
I think that's that unicorn you're looking for, is the combination of those two. The one where they've got really good gameplay, and yet it's beautiful. And if you come out with those two things, your game will not be. It will sell. It will not be one of the failures. And but that's the hard thing, is we've seen so much trash come through, and you can name a few that are the treasures through the years, the ones that actually stuck.
Rust has decent graphics, and it always kind of
PvP. I think is what really held that one together. Just the crazy PvP and everything that they figured out.
Yeah,
but there's still, you can count on one hand some of those types of games that over 10 years have been really popular. Survival games.
I'll talk to you about more than 10 years. Look at Team Fortress 2. This game came out in 2007, Brian. This game's almost 20 years old. And it's still like in the top 10 games that are being played on Steam right now. The graphics look like they're literally they're from the mid 2000s. Yet it is still an incredibly popular game. Now it is free to play, sure, but 62,000 people are playing it right now. Its all-time high was 13 months ago in 2023.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's a quarter of a million people
playing.
Hats,
right?
Yes, hats and skins. Yes. Quarter of a million people playing it at one time.
I mean,
Steam.
I enjoyed it when we played it. TF2
it's a lot of fun because it's got good gameplay.
See, but back in the early days, games would come out and, let's say I'm talking like 20 years ago, you'd have a game come out, and if it was no good, like, it would go away quickly. And they wouldn't do anything to try to bring it back up. A game came out, wasn't well received, and then you have the ones that came out and were huge. It seems like some of those, ones that should be dead on arrival, now they somehow try to keep going through, then making it free to play, then offering different, skins or game, passes, whatever it is inside of it. I feel like some of the games are artificially being kept alive that would have, back in the day, they would have killed. And I feel like it's the online nature of it. Like, they then continue trying to figure out, how can we milk this rather than letting a game die. And here, I mean, we've had mass casualties in games in the past year. So, that's kind of the fruition of the fake ones have died too. Because they couldn't keep them above water.
It's the age-old problem in the video game industry. It is impossible to know what is going to work. There's games that you and I have never even heard of that are probably some of the best made, most polished video games that have ever existed that nobody has ever heard of and nobody has ever played and nobody will ever play. And that's, I mean, it's no different than starting a business. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It can be the best idea. It can be a crappy idea. Sometimes it works. There's so many other factors that are impossible to try and wrap your head around. But what we do know for certain is that consumers are leery of indie developers for a good reason, and that they don't have the money to spend. So even if they weren't leery, Brian, even if they didn't have concerns about, is this going to be finished, they're super tight with their wallet right now. So they're not going to think of investing in a product anyway, regardless of whether there is a good track record or whether they think it's going to come to fruition or not. I mean, there's so much headwind right now that it appears to me that only the big guys are going to, I'll say, succeed, and I'll put that in air quotes, with their new releases. College Football 2025, Call of Duty that's coming out, GTA that's coming out next year. Those games are hot and will be hot. What else? Do we have an Ark? Do we have an H1Z1? Do we have a Palworld? Do we get any more of those kinds of games? And I'm just kind of looking at the top watched streams right now on Twitch. The only thing in there that's indie is Minecraft, and that's been owned by Microsoft for like 6 years now.
Microsoft is not exactly an indie company anymore.
But that's it. I mean, look at the and I don't know if Twitch is showing me viewers high to low. And this is what people are playing: GTA, Valorant, League, Fortnite, Apex, Tom Clancy's Siege, Hunt Showdown. That's kind of that's probably closer to indie. Warzone, Counter-Strike, Dota, Dead by Daylight, EA, the old what's used to be FIFA, PUBG, WoW, Elden Ring, Tarkov. I mean, these are not small titles.
Yeah.
At all.
Yep.
I mean, they're not even. I'm looking for an actual indie title in here, and I guess I wouldn't even know if I saw one.
Tibia. I mean, I don't know what some of these.
Yeah,
are.
I don't know what some of these games are. But nothing in here screams indie to you, does it?
Nope. And people are playing the big titles. I mean, DayZ used to be considered some of those things, but they're a big company now. The International Game Developers Association, they are calling what they call a call to action, trying to avoid unneeded layoffs. And I want to give you what they were saying. They said they need to maintain short-term and long-term company and industry forecasts with an understanding of the periods of acceleration and growth are usually followed up by stagnation and decline. So they're pretty much giving them a business 101 that, hey, sure, when things boom, then they burst, or, usually there's a stagnation at the end. Keep your headcount reductions to a minimum. So they're encouraging them not to lay as many people off. Reduce risk and headcount fluctuations by maintaining multiple projects if possible. Pretty much what we talked about, right? Maintain transparent communication with your team and address concerns related to well-being and job-related. Okay, let them know if you're not going to fire them. Support diversity initiatives and internal roles to help retain the increased diverse talent the games industry has developed over the last decade. So what are they asking you to do there? What are they asking you to do? Make sure you only fire the white people if possible, right? Or the non-minorities, which is man, white guy.
White man.
So they're asking you to make sure that if you're going to fire anybody, don't fire the people that we consider part of the diversity initiatives. Provide ample support to departing employees, to ensure their well-being and future success.
Sure.
That's what they're saying. Most of those are normal, but of course, they got to throw in there. Make sure you don't fire the people from the DEI, which has been some of the issues with the industry, as far as increasing their headcounts without chasing to have the best talent, right? I guess that's the nicest way to say it, because it used to be you hire people based on talent. so that they could provide you a service, do a task for you. If you're not hiring them based on that, like, what are you hiring them for? Like, what's the color of their skin? Like, what is it that you're hiring them for then? Does that sound very normal? The fact that you're hiring somebody because of their skin color?
No.
Isn't that illegal? I thought that was illegal.
I mean, it is technically.
But what about not firing somebody based on their skin color? Isn't that illegal too? I thought that was.
If that's solely the reason, but there's obviously ways to skirt around that.
Yeah. So
let's be clear. It's a rough situation.
Yeah.
The
industry's not doing good.
It's not, but let's also be clear with this. This is not just the video game industry. And I know that we're a video game podcast. That's predominantly what we focus on. We talk about some politics here and there. It says it right in our title thing. You can read it below us. But the reality is, Brian, I went out with some friends on Saturday, and one of my friends works at a lending institution that is a very sought after lending institution, is a newer company in the grand scheme of banks, right? It's not one of the major, B of A's or Chase or anything like that. And people are getting hacked and slashed nonstop over there. And it's a bloodbath right now because there's less businesses that are trying to go out and get money, and interest rates are too high. Nobody can afford to borrow money. It's too expensive. Businesses are failing. So it's not just the video game industry, and I know that's what we predominantly focus on. This is a much larger economic issue. Yep. Plain and simple.
Well, this is showing it. The problems that are all underneath the surface that they say, hey, don't look behind the curtain. We don't have these real problems. Everything's doing great. This is the best president who's had the best numbers and all these different things that Jean-Pierre or whatever is pushes.
KJP
pushes. She'll say these things, but when you pull back the curtain, this is what's happening. This is the reality of it. And, they can sit there and cry and whine on some of these sites, about it. But really what's going to turn it around is going back to making business decisions based on business principles. Quit making decisions based on politics. Quit making decisions based on hiring diversity quotas and all this. Just run your business. Hire people that are qualified for the position based on their talent. Don't take into account whether they're a man or a woman or what color their skin is or what their sexuality is, right? None of that should matter if they know how to do their job. If someone knows how to do their job, then they should be hired. Boom. There you go. That would solve a lot of these problems we're running into with funding because they wouldn't have to figure out who they can mass slash. And guess what? It's going to be some of the hires of people who maybe didn't have the qualifications and are causing them extra expense.
So looking at, we're not going to rapid fire this, but I want to go through this table on the game industry layoff and just look at some of the bigger studios in here, Brian. And we'll just kind of look at the last couple of months as what we've seen, some of the big numbers. Com2 US, which is a Chinese company.
Com2 US, yeah, they make a game that I play on mobile. That's pretty popular.
What game is it?
It is. Oh, what's it?
Is it one of the big mobile games?
Yeah, it's kind of like Raid. It's something like Raid. Summoner's War is what it's called.
Okay, they laid off 100 people. Jam City, which is another mobile developer, they laid off 85 people at the beginning of the month. Bungie, we talked about this. It's a Sony entity. 200 people. NetherRealm's studio, Humble Bundle Games.
They laid off their whole indie studio division,
which was 36 people. Yeah, just gone. NetherRealm Studios, about 50 individuals. As you continue down the list, Gameloft Toronto, which is a Viacom product. That's not a small company at all. 49 people. Paradox, that's not a small company either. 24 people they laid off there. We talked about some of the Embracer groups. 40 people from there. VR Chat laid off about 50 of their employees. Their studio can't be a whole hell of a lot bigger than that, Brian.
No.
So I can assume that's a vast majority of their studio. Here's another Gameloft, their Kharkiv office.
But look at the Tencent, 250 people with Tencent. Approximately 250 people. Right above where you're at. Sumo Games and Timber Games. Those are two studios in Tencent.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, both Tencent
right there.
Yes, 250 people from Tencent. Right, absolutely, right there. Behavior Interactive. That's not a small studio. 95 people. Avalanche, 50.
Yep.
I mean, these are entire studios. Phoenix Labs, 162. Another Gameloft studio. 136. There's like 400 people right here from Gameloft that
look at their studio wildcard. That's Arc.
That's Arc. 6 people, which isn't huge, but they've never had a huge studio. So yeah, their layoffs there. This Bethesda one, no question mark.
They didn't give exact numbers. Yeah.
GameWorks, which is another Microsoft property back a few months ago, 150. Alpha Dog Games, big mobile developer, 25 employees there. Paladin Studios, which I believe is the people that make Paladin, the game, 45 individuals back 3 months ago. So it's just all over the place. Take-Two Interactive laid off 600 freaking people in April.
No.
600.
It makes you wonder from what, like, are they maybe, but that could be, honestly, with the size of their games that they make, when they finished a certain set of their project that they don't need those people in anymore, there's 600 people go.
And I think we covered this back at the time, but I don't remember what the hell we talked about in April. Here's the Vanity Fair article about it. Video game publisher giant Take-Two Interactive is laying off 5% of its workforce, which is insane that 5% of its workforce is 600 people.
600
Approximately
people,
600 employees, and canceling several projects currently in development as part of a cost-cutting initiative. You're saying that this huge downsizing will largely be complete by the end of 2024. So they've been staggering the layoffs on these individuals. Yes, some of them may have been people that were working on early stages of GTA that are now gone. There's no longer a need for some of that. Other, it says several projects. They don't have the money in the budget to bring these potential new IPs to market. It's just too expensive, and it's too much of a risk and too much of a gamble right now.
And I know a guy who worked in the AAA industry for a while, and he said that they had their rock star devs that would come in, and they wouldn't be in the day-to-day, but they would need something done very specific that's really good. And they'd come and do that one thing. They'd make a huge amount of money for that one thing, and then they'd walk away from the project. And they took how many months off. There's that level, and then there's these guys who are the ones who are doing the day-to-day, working really hard, and when your role is no longer needed, then they're gone. But the really good ones, they're working on projects and just jumping from project to project, doing specific task work.
And it's one other thing I'll note, and it's less prominent with the smaller studios, more prominent with the larger studios. Not every single person is a quote unquote developer. These are individuals in the game industry. This is story design. This is sound. This is the visual storyboarding of what's going to be in the games. Writers. All of that stuff.
At what point GTA done with their writing to where then they don't need the stack of writers other than, a small group that maybe do corrections and edits and things like that. But you've got your whole story and all the side stories, and that would be hundreds of people sitting there writing all those side stories and making them all coordinate together, right, in the mesh of everything. Once you have all those written, what are those people supposed to do? What are you going to have them doing? They're writers. They're people who who are entertainers in a way.
And the other thing that's hard to also wrap your head around number-wise is how many of these people were temporary positions. You see a lot of this when you look at January, February, March jobs reports, because so many people lose their holiday jobs. When you work for 3 months around Christmas and into the first parts of the new year for the big rush of buying and the big rush of returns, those are known temporary positions that get hired, knowing that come mid-January or late January, whenever, depending on the business, you are going to lose, quote unquote, lose your job. That is part of what you sign up for. That is part of what the terms of employment are. I don't believe you're eligible for unemployment and things like that when you agree to those kinds of positions. That's all. I don't know how many of the 11,000, or another article said 8,000. Let's round it down to 10,000 individuals. Though. I don't know how many. I mean, is it 5%? Is it 40%? Is it 60%? I don't know. I don't know what the number is.
Like with Google, I had a year contract. Pretty much, I had a job for a year with them that was on paper. And then after that year you could decide to do a renewal, but your expectation for a job was for 1 year. You probably have a lot of people like that, to where that way they're not firing you, that they're letting your contracts expire.
And that's why I said
they don't have to do unemployment and things.
But that's why I said this is a more prominent issue when you look at the large studios, like the 600 from Take-Two.
Yep.
I would assume a lot of those, maybe even more than half, were temporary employees.
Yeah, that knew that unless for some reason they got their contract renewed, that they were going to be going off at that time anyway.
Sure. Smaller indie studios, probably not, because you're not hiring contract employees. You typically have a small group of developers. Well, but you typically have a small group of developers that are making the project. Everybody's doing a plethora of things. Maybe there are some contract people in there. Maybe there's not. It's kind of hard to tell. Less of an issue for the smaller guys, because they don't have the money to sustain contract or really many employees at all. That's often the issue.
Yep. So here, I mean, this is the part that we've clarified. This is the industry. I mean, this is just the way that this type of industry works. And it's these people coming in that seem shocked by it, and then they write a lot of articles. You're noticing something that used to be normal and people wouldn't have been all upset about. If a person in the industry who came into it would realize this is just the way this works. And I think that now we have a bunch of people who think a job is a right, that are coming in and acting surprised because a job is not a right. I mean, you got to earn a job, and
sure.
you got to keep earning that job to maintain it. And that's not normal nowadays.
And in some cases, it's of no fault of your own. I mean, if you're hired to be a writer or a storyboarder for a project and you complete the storyboard, unless you have another skill to transition into something else, you're not
being fired. It's just your role and your task is either
complete,
no longer needed. Yeah, and so you move on to another project.
Yeah, which is becoming increasingly harder now because there's less money flowing around. There's less and less new projects, so it makes it a lot harder to get into that stuff.
And that goes into the whole union talk. I mean, unions, this kind of industry is not good for unions. I mean, unions make it to where it just doesn't work. It makes it difficult to operate in this way when you have unions. And so that worries me because, video games are either going to have to drastically change how they're being developed and funded, or, the studios who don't have unions are one of the ones who end up being successful, or you're big enough to be able to support a union like Microsoft. But most of them aren't. These studios are letting go whole studios. Well, how's that work for a union? If the studios disappeared, can the union really do anything?
No, they can do nothing.
And so that seems to be how they're solving these problems now, is just they're shutting down the studios and they don't have to deal with any of the unions when they got a union.
Yeah.
Just let the whole studio go. So, and that's what we're seeing more and more of.
Well, Brian, we did it. Wasn't the prettiest of conversations, but we did it.
Yeah, we made it. So, all right. Well, if you want to find me, I know this is all happy topics, but hopefully next year things start to pick up and get better.
Give me a good screenshot, Brian. Give me a good thumbs up there. There we go. There, look at that. Real nice. Okay, phenomenal. Thanks.
So if you want to find me, of course, you can find me at Boise Computer on X, or at Brian Aldridge on GabGetters, Truth Social, and other places. Of course, check out my blog, buddhavtech.com. And if you go to our website, infectionpodcast.com, just go to the upper right-hand side and join our server on Discord. If you do that, we've got a show news channel. You can throw some links in there and review that before the live show starts. It's got 11 ARC servers running you can jump into, and places that you can contact Nick or I or talk politics. If you want to watch the live show, you can do that through Twitch or YouTube, or the upload after the fact to Rumble. We also have the podcast forms uploaded to the different platforms after the show is done. So pick whatever is the most convenient for you at the lower right-hand side. If you're doing that, that means the show notes are all ready and uploaded, and there's a video and audio player built right into that page. And on there's links to everything that we discussed through the live show. So we'll have a lot of just numbers, announcements of layoffs and closures, and some different opinion pieces talking about layoffs and the state of the video game industry. You can go check those out. Of course, if you want to support us, you can go to infectionpodcast.com /support, or the menu option up top where it says support.
And again, I want to thank our friend Donnie Plays PC, has been with us practically since the beginning for subscribing for, 26 months in a row here on Twitch. Brian, thank you, my friend. Greatly appreciated. We'll do it again next week.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Alrighty, folks, you can check me out on Twitter at Nicholas M. Craig. You can visit my website, nickcraig.com. There's a little email form on there to put in your email, stay up to date with what my next exciting projects are going to be. And, of course, if you missed any portion of today's program, we have a laundry list of lists of layoffs and various economic news. You can find all of that by visiting our website, infectionpodcast.com. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.